In the mountains of southern India, there is a tribe that says they have been alone for thousands of years. The Nilgiri Hills, a plateau rising over 2,000 meters above the plains of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Up here, separated from the lowland populations by steep escarpments and dense forest, the Toda people built a world entirely their own. No farming, no metals, no contact with the civilizations below. Just their buffalo and their mountains. A plateau above the clouds, cut off from the civilizations that rose and fell below. While empires conquered the plains, the Toda stayed above. While languages spread and religions changed, the Toda kept their own. Their claim was simple: we have always been here. And nobody took it seriously until now. When population geneticists finally tested the Toda, they found something remarkable. Their DNA was unlike any other population in India. For centuries, outsiders dismissed the Toda as a curiosity, a tiny pastoral tribe herding sacred buffalo on a remote plateau. British colonial ethnographers documented them in the 1800s. They noted the Toda's unique customs, their elaborate dairy rituals, their polyandrous marriage system, and their claim that they had always been on the mountain. Always, not migrated from elsewhere, not descended from a lowland kingdom. They said they were born on the Nilgiris. When the British first climbed to the plateau, they found a people completely untouched by the world below. No knowledge of the Mughal Empire, no influence from Chola temple architecture, no trace of the Hindu Brahmanical traditions that dominated the plains. They had missed 4,000 years of Indian civilization. They were still living in their own world, a world built entirely around their sacred buffalo herds. Most anthropologists assumed it was a founding myth. Then, geneticists tested their DNA. To understand what the DNA showed, you first need to understand the genetic history of India itself. In 1929, David Reich and colleagues at Harvard published a landmark study establishing that nearly all modern Indian populations are a mixture of two ancient ancestral groups. They called them Ancestral North Indian and Ancestral South Indian, ANI and ASI. ANI was related to Central Asians and Europeans. ASI was something far older and entirely indigenous. The model was elegant. Two ancient populations, mixing at different ratios to produce the diversity seen across India today. More blue in the north, more green in the south. But every glass had some of both. Every population in India was supposed to be a mixture of these two ancestries. No exceptions. Until the Toda data came in. Before the British built roads in the 1830s, the only access was on foot through dense tropical forest. Days of climbing through leech-infested forest. No path wider than a single person. The gradient was stark. Northern populations carried more ANI. Southern populations carried more ASI. No population was purely one or the other. Everyone was mixed. The admixture reached every corner of the subcontinent, or almost every corner, almost, because the Toda were different. Their ASI component was among the highest ever measured. In study after study, the Toda emerged as one of the least admixed populations in all of India. The AI component, the Central Asian and European related ancestry that mixed into most of India roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. The researchers re-ran the analysis multiple times. The result held every time. 3 different methods, same result. The Toda were genetically unlike any other sampled population in India. They weren't slightly different. They were at the extreme end of the entire Indian genetic spectrum. Thousands of years of mountain isolation had preserved an ancestry that everywhere else had been diluted. The Toda also showed signs of reduced genetic diversity, consistent with a small population isolated for a very long time. Had barely reached the Toda. Their genomes retained ancient South Indian ancestry that most populations diluted through millennia of mixing. Even other tribal groups in the Nilgiris showed more admixture. The Toda had remained genetically distinct from their own neighbors. They were living on the same mountain as other tribes. But genetically, they were in a different world. The geography of the Nilgiris helps explain how. The plateau sits above 2,000 meters, surrounded by near vertical escarpments covered in dense shola forest. Before colonial roads, reaching the top required days of climbing through thick undergrowth. A natural fortress, the Toda at the top had no reason to come down, and no visitors from below. The mountain did what no human policy could. It kept one population sealed off for thousands of years. But the genetic isolation goes deeper than geography. Morjani and colleagues at Harvard used linkage disequilibrium decay to date when the Ani-Azi mixing happened in different Indian populations. For most Indian groups, the major mixing event happened between 2,000 and 4,000 years ago. Their material culture shows no influence from the Iron Age, the Chola period, or any other lowland technological tradition. Skills and designs passed down for centuries within a closed community on a mountaintop. When a culture develops in total isolation, everything about it becomes unique. Language, art, religion, DNA, every artifact tells the same story of a people who developed their entire material world in complete isolation. But for the Toda, the signal was different. The mixing was minimal, and what little there was happened much earlier. The Toda largely missed the wave of steppe related migration that transformed the rest of the subcontinent. While steppe pastoralists mixed with Indus populations in the north, the Toda herded buffalo 2,000 kilometers south, untouched, unaware, genetically frozen in time. The rest of India was being genetically reshaped. The Toda didn't even notice. 4,000 years of empires, invasions, and migrations. The Toda experienced none of it. The Mughals never climbed the escarpment. The Cholas never sent missionaries. The steppe pastoralists never brought their cattle. Every wave of change that reshaped the subcontinent broke against the walls of the Nilgiris. The escarpment was enough. 2,000 meters of altitude and impenetrable forest. The Toda's genetics reveal what the original South Indian population looked like before the Great Mixing began. The Toda are a window into ancient India. Their DNA preserves what everyone else has diluted. Because the Toda retained so much Asi ancestry, geneticists use them as one of the key reference populations for reconstructing the original Asi genetic profile. The ASI component is ancient, a lineage present in South Asia for tens of thousands of years, predating the Indus Valley civilization, predating agriculture in South Asia, one of the oldest continuous human lineages on the continent. And the Toda carry more of that ancient lineage than almost anyone else alive. They are a living genetic archive, walking evidence of what South Asia looked like before the steppe migration. But the Toda's isolation was not just genetic. Their entire culture evolved in isolation too. Their cultural practices reflect the same deep isolation the DNA reveals. Ritual objects found nowhere else. Ceremonies described in no other tradition. The culture evolved in the same isolation as the DNA. Everything about the Toda is a time capsule. Sacred groves that have been used for ceremonies longer than recorded history in the region. The Toda never adopted agriculture, never built cities, never used metal tools until the British arrived. Their entire economy revolved around their sacred buffalo herds, milk, butter, and ghee. Their embroidery patterns, their architectural style, their religious practices, all developed in isolation without influence from the lowland civilizations that surrounded them. When British ethnographers first encountered the Toda in the 1800s, they were astonished. William Rivers published the first major study in 1906. He described a society unlike anything else in India: polyandrous marriage, sacred dairies as temples, a caste system based on buffalo herding rank. Nothing like their neighbors. Their homes were different. Their language was different. Their gods were different. Field teams continue to visit the plateau. Each trip may be more valuable than the last. Every sample collected today captures a moment in a genetic history that is rapidly changing. In 20 years, the Toda genome will look different. The isolation signal will be weaker. This is the last window. The Toda language belongs to the South Dravidian family, but it diverged from its closest relatives so long ago that mutual intelligibility was lost. Even their language tells the same story. Separation, deep time, a path that split from everyone else's long ago. But here is where the story gets more nuanced, because isolation is never absolute. The linguistic split and the genetic isolation happened in the same time window. Culture and biology tell the same story. Fewer than 2,000 people speak the Toda language today. It has no written form. When a language has no written form and fewer than 2,000 speakers, it can disappear in one generation. The genetics and the language are both under threat, both irreplaceable records of Deep South Asian history. The Toda were isolated, but they were not completely sealed off. Some gene flow did occur. The 15 to 20% ancestry in the Toda did not appear from nowhere. Some contact happened, trade with neighboring Nilgiri tribes, occasional intermarriage, a slow trickle over millennia. But compared to what happened in the rest of India, the Toda's mixing was minimal. They absorbed less outside DNA in 4,000 years than most Indian groups absorbed in a few hundred. The scientific value of the Toda is not about purity. It's about preservation. They preserved what everyone else lost. Education, intermarriage, and migration are doing in decades what geography prevented for millennia. The buffalo herding economy that sustained the Toda's isolation is giving way to plantation work and tourism. The mountain can't protect them anymore. The world came up the road, and it's not leaving. Where buffalo once grazed undisturbed, tourist lodges now stand. Small population size combined with isolation creates strong genetic drift. The Toda's effective population size has been estimated at just a few hundred for most of their history. A few hundred people on a mountaintop for thousands of years. That is how you preserve ancient DNA intact. That's what makes them scientifically extraordinary. Not total isolation, but near total isolation, verified by DNA. The Toda's genetic profile has also contributed to understanding the broader structure of South Asian ancestry. The ASI component that the Toda preserved in such high proportion appears to be related to the Andamanese. The Toda are making their own choices about how to engage with the modern world. Some are studying the very science that revealed their genetic uniqueness. The Onch and Jarawa of the Andaman Islands share deep ancestry with the ASI component. Both populations preserved fragments of what South Asia's original human inhabitants looked like genetically. The Toda on their mountain and the Andamanese on their islands. Two isolated windows into the same ancient past, separated by geography, but united by an ancestry that stretches back tens of thousands of years. Today, the Toda number fewer than 2,000 people. The Toda represent one of the last direct windows into what South Asia looked like before the Bronze Age transformations. Their DNA is the closest living approximation to the ancestral South Indian genome that scientists have access to. You cannot dig up the ASI population. They left no fossils. But the Toda carry their genome. Without the Toda, the ASI reconstruction would be far less precise. Their isolation made them indispensable to science. 2,000 people carrying one of the oldest genetic lineages on the Indian subcontinent. Their traditional way of life is under pressure. Roads now connect the Nilgiris to the lowlands. Eucalyptus plantations have replaced much of the native grassland. Tourism has brought outsiders to the plateau. The genetic isolation that lasted thousands of years is ending in a single generation. The mountain that kept them separate for millennia no longer works. The roads go straight through, but the DNA they carry is irreplaceable, a record of what South Asia's founding population looked like before the Great Mixing began. The youth are leaving the plateau, learning lowland languages, marrying outside the community. Each generation that mixes with the lowland populations dilutes the ancient Asi signal a little more. The clock is running. Every generation of mixing erases a little more of the ancient archive. What took thousands of years to preserve could be diluted in just a few more decades. Researchers are now racing to document and preserve the Toda's genetic heritage before further admixture dilutes the signal. Every sample preserved today is a snapshot of ancient South Asian ancestry that cannot be recovered once it mixes further. The Toda were right. They had been alone on that mountain for thousands of years. The DNA proves it. Not a myth, not a founding legend, a genetic reality verified by the most advanced tools in modern science. If this changed what you thought you knew, subscribe. The next story goes even deeper. 1,000 people on a mountaintop carrying 16,000 years of unbroken ancestry. The DNA doesn't lie. Sources for this video are linked in the description below. The mountain kept their secret for thousands of years. The DNA finally told the world.